my mic is muted. Hi, and welcome to the Women of Power Hour. My name is Laura Topper, and I'm feeling really just blessed to be here at this time of year, to be tuning in, to be here with New Thought Media Network, and in anticipation of our superpower guest today, Dr. Ruth Miller, who I know is working out any technical issues, and that she is here coming into the show, into the broadcast. We are ready for you. I am here, Dr. Ruth, ready for you. If you can manage to work out what the technical blip is, then we're waiting for you here, because today's show is really it's the one of the few shows before the Christmas season. I know we're in the middle of Hanukkah right now, and there's a lot going on for all of us. And so it's really this time of year, really vital that we take charge of who we are and what we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to and what we're just giving our power away to, and where we're kind of leaking with those boundaries and doing things that we may not really be fulfilled with, because there's an expectation to get everything done. Let's center in here and let's be present here for the moment and just take a breath. It's 8 o'clock here in the evening in the UK, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you. I know that we're here as one. There's no time in the mind of the divine. And so I speak my word from this place, just breathing in. Ooh, and breathing out and centering into this now moment where all is good, all is perfect, all is love, all is joy. And here there are infinite possibilities. And so I'm knowing that Dr. Ruth finds her way here, if this is what is for the highest and best for today's Women of Power Hour show. And if not, then we find another time to welcome in Dr. Ruth Miller. And for each and every one of us here, each of you, wherever you are, welcome in and just breathing in that blessed breath, filling up, knowing it's the healing light of love that's touching and reaching every single cell in your body right now. It knows exactly what to do to revitalize, to re-energize, to restore. And so we stay in this knowing of the love that is here, the infinite love, giving gratitude for all that is, and opening our eyes, refreshed and renewed in this moment. And so it is. And so it is. So welcome here. And today I just really would like to share some thoughts that are running through my mind and my heart about how we can really be more specifically orientated around knowing who we are and really what is ours to do and where is ours to be right here and right now at this time. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the UK. There's a lot going on in America. There's political experiences. There are political experiences. There are royal experiences. There is all sorts of conversation and debate about the topics that really push us and press us to question who we are and whose we are. And this is really powerful, because the more we lean into these topics, whatever they are, whether they are about color, race, religion, politics, finance, sex, health, whatever it is, this is a time for us to have a great renewal for our lives and to open up to that greater understanding of who and whose we are. Oneness, we know, prevails. Oneness, I know that if I look at a situation and I look back and behind that situation, I know that there is love there. And I'm not talking about human emotional love, feely, touchy. I'm talking about the love of the divine that is always here when we feel disempowered, when we feel that we cannot go on, when we feel that, oh, this is happening again and again. What more is there that can come through that's going to push me down and make me feel like I just don't want to get up in the morning? When we're feeling like that, I'm really inviting you and me to really seek and know and connect with the connection of the light that is in each of our hearts. So it's Hanukkah right now, the light, the festival of light. There are many festival of lights that are happening around this time. Christmas, Kwanzaa, the winter solstice. There was the burning of the Yule. Pastor Michael Mangus was doing that 2 nights ago. There is this recognition of light happening everywhere around us, and we can join in with ritual, and we can create our own ritual in our own lives right here in the moment. We don't need anything really outside of ourselves to be able to do this. Whether it's for your business, your health, or your relationships, or the relationships that are predominant for your life, and the relationship with yourself and with the divine. There is always an opportunity. Yes, we have Wayne here, and he's saying, I can embrace the new. Absolutely embracing the new right now. There is always an opportunity to do this, to turn to that spark of light, however tiny the flame is in your heart, and to open up to knowing that this light is the light of the divine. This light is the wisdom and the intelligence that's going to see us through as we turn away from thinking that we have to do it all and be in control of it all. We could surrender to this higher power, to the greater knowing and wisdom that is always, always, always here. Matthew 5:16. Yes, if you'd like to just, I can go and get my Bible and read that out, but I don't have the actual verse here in front of me. So whatever that is, we're being called to turn to Matthew 5:16 right now. So where are you feeling, or where are you knowing, or maybe not knowing or realize, where can you love yourself even more greatly in this moment, at this time of year, and come into that light, the light in your own heart, and live from that place? I lit the Hanukkah candles tonight with Michael Mangus, Pastor Reverend Michael, on New Thought Media Network. That was such a beautiful experience. And Reverend Gill and Robin came on as well. That was an amazing experience to do that. And we're doing it every single night on the network, to remember who we are, to remember the truth of the light that we are. We're always being shown. And why are we always just, it's so easy just to ignore? We ignore what really is going on. So this is a time to renew. This is a time to connect with the light. This is the time to open our hearts, to check our self-talk. How are you talking with yourself? So often I hear clients, they'll say to me, or even people that I'm in conversation with, that will say, well, how do I know what's really stored in my subconscious mind? I mean, I don't know what my real beliefs are, if they're that hidden. How do I know what they are? And I say, well, check your self-talk. How are you talking with yourself in those quiet moments when no one's listening, when something's happening and there's a dialogue going on? That's the subconscious coming to the surface. And many of those times, the conversation might not be at all positive about ourselves. We're very good at putting ourselves in a place that is far removed from that connection. Not that we're ever disconnected, but we take ourselves to the edge of the light, if that's possible. And we're good at that. We're good at doing that because we've been trained to not to see ourselves. As children in school, we've been trained to not to see ourselves as the light of who we are, and to embody that and embrace it and celebrate it. And so I'm inviting you to celebrate the light in your heart right now. And as you hear these messages, in whatever it is that's coming through in that stream of self-talk, to, rather than complying with it, question those messages. Is this really true? The work of Byron Katie is so powerful. Is this really true? Is this really true, what I'm saying about my life, this situation? You see, I knew Dr. Ruth would pop in here, and she is. She's here. And so, Dr. Ruth Miller, I'm going to bring her into the studio. Welcome.
Oh my, I've been sitting here for almost half an hour. Somehow it didn't work, but this is lovely. I'm delighted we can be in the same place at the same time again.
And this is wonderful. You're here at exactly the right time. And I know that me coming on probably prompted you to come into the room on some level. So welcome to the Women of Power Hour show. It's so great to be here with you again. And I would like to read out some information about you for the viewers that are here and watching right now, because we have some wonderful viewers in. We're here with Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller, and what an incredible inspiration and source of wisdom, and an individual that has and is achieving in so many different ways, bringing the New Thought teachings to the world and kind of weaving together her magic with the ways that she shows up in the world with these teachings. So Dr. Miller integrates her scientific, cultural, spiritual studies in books, and the books that she authors, many, many, many books, and we'll show these later on in the program. Home, Choosing Humanity's Future, Making the World Go Away. Yes, Madonna, Magdalene, and Beyond, and the feminine power hidden in the empire culture. And as a minister and ordained in the New Thought tradition, Dr. Miller offers an interfaith approach to spiritual development, facilitating transformative processes and helping us to grow, or helping to grow congregations in the unity and science of mind and Unitarian Universalist traditions. Dr. Miller earned her doctorate in systems science from Portland State University, and she is best described as a synthesis of all things relevant to consciousness, human potential, and culture. Dr. Miller works with academic institutions, individuals, nonprofits, churches, and small businesses to guide them through the confusion of today's world and into the new culture that is unfolding in and around so many people today. What a blessing for you to be here, Dr. Miller. Welcome to the Women of Power Hour show.
It's an honor to be here and to be considered a woman of power.
Oh yes, you certainly are. You are an example and an inspiration, living New Thought teachings and the way that you bring them to the world. The way that, yes, you weave so many different strands of your education experience together to share that in such a profound way. And I really would love to know, my first question for you today is, what is your superpower?
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Allowing God's energy to do the work. Allowing divine energy to flow And if I had one, that would be it. And when you said that, what I remembered, there's this marvelous story of Ernest Holmes attending the 1918 first meeting of the International New Thoughts Alliance. And Emma Curtis Hopkins is the honorary president, and people are there from all over the world. And Nona Brooks was there from Denver, Colorado, where she had established with Melinda Kramer and Fanny Brooks the College of Divine Science. And Holmes was into interviewing every healer that he could. And he was interviewing Nona Brooks. And he sat in on one of her workshops and he came up to her and he said, "Ah, I understand your secret. It is omnipresence." She lived
Yes.
omnipresence. She was a profound healer and he was very impressed.
Isn't that amazing? So I feel that that here we are, and I've asked you this same kind of question. The omnipresence that that you teach, and you share the teachings of omnipresence. Really, that's what you're doing, and you're doing it from a spiritual, a religious, metaphysical, scientific approach, cultural, anthropological. There's so many different strands, the way you weave it together. What is it for you what gets you going? What is the interest in all of this for you? And when I say interest, I don't mean from I mean, what is it that sparks your curiosity? What's kept you going with this all this time?
Beautiful. And it is curiosity, isn't it? Because that's the universe is consistently unfolding. And if we can kind of pay attention, we can see something more to be curious about. And that pulls us into it. So when I was 5 years old, I lived in the inner city in Chicago, and my school was on the other side of a part of the ghetto. So I would be, we were driving through that time. So people would come and pick me up and take me to school. And I would drive through these areas where the houses were so dilapidated and people were so miserable and there was trash everywhere. And I could feel between 5 and 7 how if it didn't look like that, people wouldn't feel like that. And it was this kind of thing that made itself happen. I didn't understand any of that, but I could see it, right? And when I was about 7, my grandmother introduced me to a concept in the Bible: these things and greater shall you do. Can you imagine a life?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My grandmother had lived in India, and she came back having seen what we call fakirs today, sleeping on beds of nails, seeing people who had been blind no longer blind, seeing people who had been lame no longer lame. So she knew these were possible. She didn't know how to achieve that for herself, but she knew it was possible. And so being with someone, I spent a few days with her almost every month, and being with someone who knew it has got to have rubbed off.
Oh, yes. What was her intrigue with India? What drew her to India?
Right. Technically, she was a Methodist missionary. Her father was a Methodist circuit riding preacher and a geology professor, which I think is marvelous in the 1800s, right? So she went to India right at the beginning of the 20th century and ended up working on a couple of Gandhi's projects. And she married there and had kids. And then her husband decided he had to come back to the States. I think it broke her heart. I think she had intended to be there for the rest of her life. And they moved back to the States. Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. But she did. She was a good wife. And so she became one of Gandhi's spokespeople during that period between the 20s and the 50s that people here didn't understand. So she had a red sari that she would put on. And I had it for most of my growing up years. And she would explain who Gandhi was and what he was doing and why it was important for us to support him.
This is incredible because on Wisdom of the Mystics last week, Dr. Aaron Gandhi came on
Oh,
with
marvelous.
me and Kathy, Reverend Kathy. I don't know if I've never been with him before, never met him before. What a beautiful, beautiful person.
Absolutely.
Talking
Doing
about Gandhi.
I'm doing marvelous things in the world. For 40 years, I've been kind of watching what Arun
Yes.
Gandhi has been doing. It's just lovely.
So your grandmother was a great inspiration for you, especially as a geology teacher. I can imagine that was like her academic
Actually, she
brain
wasn't
was.
the geology teacher. Her father was. My grandmother
Oh,
was an art historian and the dean of a college in Illinois.
oh, okay. So you were being shown how you can do it all. You can bring it all together.
Yes, I was. I was.
Yes.
So her father was a college professor. His father created a business school, and her mother's father created a medical school. And I'm fifth generation of yes, you can do it all. Mom,
Yes.
mom worked for the Defense Department my whole life, which was always an interesting contrast because there's grandmother speaking for Gandhi and mom working for the Defense Department. And and mom honestly believed she was working for world peace. She had herself convinced of that, and I bought into it. And then so my daughter, one of my daughters, has become a medical doctor who teaches medical doctors, interns and residents. So she's sixth generation academician.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of woven into the culture of the family. But the spiritual aspect has always been there too. As I say, my grandmother's father was a Methodist minister. And she often would lead the services at the college as the dean of the college. There were many Sundays where she was actually doing the Sunday service in the college. And then that was an opening. Although I married a Catholic, and in the Catholic tradition, women don't have much power. So
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Oh.
And I actually
Yeah.
had a physical breakdown almost 20 years into our marriage. And I had this emotional breakdown to go with it. And I found myself driving in the hills around the Bay Area. And there's a Catholic chapel up in the hills in the Redwoods. And I found myself driving to it, parking, walking in tears in the back of the chapel. And then I was looking up and I saw myself standing at the altar in priestly garb, in holding the chalice.
Right.
And I didn't know what to do with that. And I went to a retreat center I knew that had counseling services, but they said, no, you misunderstood. Well, it was 10 years later that I was ordained.
Yes. Oh, yes. And so that experience, just your mind wanted to know, your heart needed to understand what had happened.
Oh, yes.
I get that. Wow.
Yes.
So you followed your heart. You followed this. It's more than curiosity, isn't it? It's like a pull.
Right.
You had to do it.
Right. And during that 10 years, one of the things I started doing is rehabbing homes in the inner city in Portland.
Right.
And helped to create that whole system. What we did, all those organizations together did 500 houses in about 5 years. And yeah.
And so for anyone that's watching right now and viewing, welcome. First of all, welcome to you. We're here with Dr. Ruth Miller, and Dr. Ruth is talking about her life today rather than someone else's, because
that is true.
Dr. Ruth is really good at talking about other people's lives, people that we love, people that she has researched and knows really well and written books about. And today we're hearing from Dr. Ruth. Any questions that you have for her, please write them into the comments because they'll be most welcome, or any ideas that you have. And really a question I have is that's so incredible because you then took up, you knew you had to follow your heart, become a minister. Did you know what that was going to be like? Did you know what that was going to mean?
You know, I wasn't aware that women could be in that role at that point in the mid 80s. So early 80s. So I just knew that I had to go step by step, and my body was broken down. So the step by step was to find how to heal the body. That's what took me into New Thought. And I learned that there is a voice, a guide, a prompter inside us. And I heard it as a voice initially. And then I started feeling it as just a physical pull. And that pull would take me into these little chapels and churches that I'd seen but not registered, that were Unity and Science of Mind. And I would never go to a Sunday service. This was fascinating. It would never want me to be there on a Sunday. But in the middle of the week, there would be a brochure or a person or a something, right? And one time it was in a Christian Science reading room, and this older man was there, and I was saying, there's something here. I know there is. I don't know what it is. He handed me his well-worn copy of Mary Baker Eddy's book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. And that was amazing. And then in Unity, I picked up Emmett Fox's Golden Key. And then I picked up a couple of treatment pamphlets in religious science churches, which are now centers for spiritual living. And they just all started coming to me. And then some friends of mine who knew what I was going through said, there's this woman teaching this class that she thinks is how Jesus Christ did his healing. Do you want to come? Duh.
Yes.
Well, it turned out to be Reiki.
Oh.
So I became a Reiki practitioner, and this is where I learned about allowing the divine energy to flow through us into whatever person or situation it needs to be. And then I started picking up on other things, and so slowly but steadily, it took 18 months from the first full collapse to functioning, able to be a mom and a worker again, right? I was still breaking down every now and then, but.
So you were actually, and I had no idea this is intriguing. You were using the teachings really directly for your own life, for your physical and emotional health. You were using the teachings of Mary Baker Eddy and Emmett Fox.
Right. And
Reiki.
Yeah.
And Ernest
and
Holmes.
Reiki. Yeah. All of it together. And there was one other piece. I hadn't heard about Louise Hay yet, although I did.
I was going to ask you.
Right. Yeah. What I read every book I could remember anyone having been healed in. All the novels that I'd ever read or anything like that. I went back to all the Lloyd C. Douglas, Shoes of the Fisherman, those kinds of things. I went and reread a few other things. Anyway, The Big Fisherman. And I remembered a novel by Catherine Marshall called Christy, in which a woman Christy herself had been dying, was actually in the garden on the other side of the veil, and someone's love for her pulled her back into this side of the veil. And it was beautiful. And so I went back to read that and found other books that she read and wrote. And one of them was a book called Something More. And in it, we learned that Catherine Marshall, her husband was Peter Marshall. A Man Called Peter is a film based on his life. He was a Scottish Presbyterian minister who became the U.S. Congress chaplain and was there for years. While he was there, she was in bed for 2 years with TB. And I'd never heard this story. And she... nothing that they were doing would help. Nothing was helping. And then some minister came by and was chatting with her, and she heard the gospel quote forgive aught against any. And it rang a bell for her, and it rang a bell for me. And what she did is she wrote letters to everybody that she held any resentment, anger, frustration, anything other than love for. And then she would, when she could get out of bed, go and drop them in the fireplace for spirit to carry the message. I went, here is a key. So within weeks, she was up and about. Within months, she was completely cured. And nobody knew what I had, but the prognosis was like 6 months because of the internal bleeding. And we know a lot more about what was going on then now. But at that time, nobody understood. And so I didn't have a medical solution. I had to go to the spiritual. And I started doing this process of forgiveness. And I realized how much anger and resentment I still had toward my mother. I was the only child of a single working mom who really didn't want to be a mom. And, you know, how much anger and resentment had built up in 20 years of marriage and hadn't been addressed ever because I was a nice girl, right? And I was a good wife. So I began to unload all of that emotional back stuff. And that then, as I began to do that, then the Louise Hay material came my way. You can heal your life, right? And Oprah was popular then. I didn't have a TV, but every now and then I'd be where there was one, and Oprah would be on, and so all of that stuff was happening. The gratitude journal came out about then. So all of those tools contributed to my recovery and to my being able to be and do what I have been doing for the last, oh my gosh, 30 years. It'll be 30 years in February that I've been a minister.
Oh, this is so powerful, because what I'm hearing is that you were taking the teachings, like the wisdom teachings of the original New Thought teachers, or when I say original, well, those in the early 1900s reading them. And isn't it amazing how Louise Hay and these other people that were coming through and they were popularizing and giving us exercises and tools that are really compact and easy to understand, rather than having to look through the Bible for decoding. Here we are suddenly in the 80s and 90s with, you can do this forgiveness work like this, you can do this gratitude work like this, you can do this letting go, whatever it is, appreciation work. So powerful that happened.
Yep, it is. And it
mainstreamed it.
Yeah. And I'd always been spiritual. Obviously, I couldn't help but be with that, childhood. And yet I couldn't, those things hadn't become available to me. I knew about them. And I remember early years in my marriage going, okay, I'm living a normal life. I am not being a nun. I am not being, the student of a guru. I'm not being a chela. I'm not being a disciple. I'm living the normal life of a wife and mother. So I actually kind of was aware that, and confirmed, I claimed what I was beginning to see, that the teaching that I need would always come to me as I went through my life.
Right.
And I didn't know at the time that I was doing affirmative prayer. Right? I just sensed that was, and that it would always be, and I knew it. And it's been my life. Exactly, the next teaching has unfolded. And as I say, the universe is constantly unfolding, so there's always something to be curious about. I had been reading Wayne Dyer's early work long before he understood, did any of this New Thought stuff. So I understood Your Erroneous Zones. That was his first book. So I understood some of these concepts. I was familiar with Dianetics, which is what the basis for Scientology, where they were saying there are emotional lumps in you that can be cleared away. But I didn't have a technology for that, except for speaking into a can with a string, which did not make sense to me. And so these tools, just came to me. as I took each step, as I did what I was prompted from inside to do, showing up in that chapel was the first major prompting. And that vision of,
Yes.
I'm in tears at the feet of the altar, seeing myself in this robe, holding this
Yes.
chalice. And it was like, wow, I have no idea what that's about.
And you can't even explain that direct experience and for another to really catch the idea of that or the vision of that, because it's so profound when you're feeling it yourself. It's inexplainable.
You got it. And
so, and yet it drove you to open up to a full healing for your life.
Yep. And so by the time I was ordained, I had all the tools, and I now had the intellectual understanding of the development of those tools. And I could be ordained in the New Thought tradition because it totally fits systems theory. They are one and the same cosmology.
Yes.
It's fascinating.
So what, were you aware of systems theory?
Yes, at that point,
was that something you were studying
as I was completing the doctorate?
Okay.
So
right.
that was my fourth degree, and I had 2 kids, and I had
so what drove you? What guided you to systems theory?
Lovely. Yeah, well, I told you about being little and seeing the ghetto and seeing how messed up lives were, and then we moved into the California area, and one of the things that I saw was that we were in the San Francisco Bay Area. Mom took another job, and I did high school there. And I had seen in Chicago that if you were African American, you were to be afraid of. There were gangs, they were going to hurt you. In the San Francisco area at that time, if someone was Chinese, they were someone to be afraid of. They were someone, they might be in gangs. They might be out there to hurt you. So you stay away from any adolescent Chinese male, right? Or anyone in their young, under 40 or 50. And then for whatever reason, Mom decided I should go to college in New Mexico. So I was 16 when I graduated from high school. And so she got, shipped me off to college in New Mexico, drove me out there. And in New Mexico, it was the Indians, the Native Americans. You have to be afraid of them. And I began to realize there is this cultural shift, this cultural thing that goes on about what I began to think of as the largest minority, whatever the largest minority is, because you could be African American in Albuquerque and be fine, but you couldn't be Indian in Albuquerque without people being concerned at that time. And so to have that experience was kind of and then I took, everyone takes their courses, and one of my family members was an art historian at the University of New Mexico, which is why I think Mom chose it. And I took one of the classes he recommended, which was Anthro 101. And it was about culture and how cultures work. And I got hooked, really, on that first class. But I just out of curiosity, I did another term and I took a comparative religions class. And in comparative religions, I had been trained as a scientist. I had a Heart Association research grant when I was 16. I was doing this work, right? I was going to be in the sciences. And in comparative religions, I saw that being a scientist who didn't accept the divine presence was counter to every other culture on the planet. Every other culture, because in anthropology, you're looking at what the Maoris believe, what the Senegal believe, what all these different tribes and nations and cultures. And at that time, there were about 500 cultures on the planet, and every one of them accepted a power greater than the human mind, except us, except the scientific American. And so I went, okay, or European at that time. So I went, all right, I will take as a working hypothesis that there is a power greater than me that has created and is creating what is going on in the world and in my life. And so that put me in anthropology and opened me up to all of this stuff. And then I married a guy in the Navy that we met at college, and we went off to various bases. And one of them, every few months, we'd go across the bridge and all the fish would be dead on the surface of the water. And then we were transferred to another place where the soot was a layer all over everything. And I went, there's something that needs to be addressed here, right? And so I got involved with the League of Women Voters Environmental Research Group and set up environmental studies centers around that naval base and community around there. And then we were transferred back to California, and I got involved in some stuff there. And then I found an environmental studies degree program. So that got me into that program, right? And then doing that program, I discovered that we have no idea why humanity destroys their environment.
Yes.
Not every culture.
No idea.
And not every culture does that, as I knew from anthropology, right? I knew, for example, the Hopi have been where they are for thousands of years, living the way they used to live for thousands of years, or in Tibet, or all over these places, all over the world, where a group of people is on a piece of land, not destroying it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there must be another way. So some friends of mine were looking at graduate schools, and they had a catalog open. And the first course was technology and society. And the second course was future studies. And the third course was systems dynamics. And I was hooked. And I called the program going, how do I apply? And he says, well, classes start next week. It's a little late. And I said, oh dear. And he says, well, tell me about yourselves. And I told him about both my husband and I had taken the environmental studies program, and he had a biology degree and I had the anthropology degree, and we were in our mid-20s. And he said, if you can show up here for classes 400 miles away on Monday, I'll walk your application through. So with a brand new baby, we packed up and we're there for classes on Monday.
Yeah, a woman of power.
Oh my
I just have to underline that right now. A being of power. Yeah. I mean, this is really just the courage and the faith and the listening and honoring what you're hearing and what you're feeling and going for it.
Thank you, dear.
It's beautiful. And it's like, this is a message not only for, for if there are young girls or young women watching this, or young beings watching this, to follow our hearts, because we don't know these stepping stones that we're saying yes to. They unravel and unravel and unravel into something really profound a couple of years later or a few years later. We don't even know why at the time.
And one of the things that I've seen is I seem to have a 10-year process. I'll go full on somewhere for about 10 years. And then what I had been doing the previous 10 years comes into it. And so the next 10 years is the 2. And then I'm full on, and that kind of thing. It's been fascinating to watch.
And Sonia here, Sonia Harte, is a practitioner, a licensed spiritual practitioner. And she is saying, yes, a fearless woman. I love your story. What an awesome journey.
No.
Thank you, Sonia, for being here. Great to be here with you today. And for everybody that's here right now live, we are with the incredible Dr. Ruth Miller, sharing her life stories from her life. This is beautiful.
You're very kind. Thank you.
So interested. So you took the course. Wow. And you completed it.
Oh, yeah. That was the master's in cybernetic systems. And several of the instructors were involved. This is very interesting. I told you my mother went to work in California. She went to work for Stanford Research Institute. And several of the instructors in the cybernetic systems program were working at the Stanford Research Institute. Mom had left, was working for the Department of Energy for a while, and at Lawrence Livermore, Los Alamos. And then these guys were teaching these classes, and I'm going, I understand this, and this. Is there any way I can help? And so I started working at Stanford Research Institute 10 years after my mother. And and I ended up working for one of the same guys, because when I was in college, Mom had been working on this project and I'd been helping her. And it was Willis Harman, who went on to become the Institute of Noetic Sciences director. So Willis Harman's been part of my life since I was in college. And it's been kind of cool to watch that. So I got involved in his work, and Oliver Markley and Dwayne Elgin and those guys were all working on how do we bring a deeper understanding of culture and consciousness to future studies. And so I was working with them on various projects, and one of their consultants was the guy who runs the system science program at Portland State University in Oregon. And he came down and he said, "I'll pay you if you come up and get a doctorate." I said, "I will come up and get a doctorate, but you have to bring my husband too."
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. So that's how that happened.
And that allows you now to see life and to feel life in such an expansive way.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You can bring in, and just the cultural piece for me is so intriguing. And that piece that you said about how you were questioning how, for example, the Hopi Indians love the land and honor the land. What is it that went wrong? Or not went wrong, but what went different with us here in,
Well, this is that long-term view we were talking about last time we talked. You know, if we go back to 4000 BC or 3200 BC, in that period, we're seeing the beginning of the shift. And the beginning of the shift is having one person, usually a man, be in charge and organizing people like, into a structure, a machine structure. So one of the things I do periodically is I'll go back and read books that influenced me years ago. And Lewis Mumford wrote about the city and history back when I was doing all of this exploration. And I was rereading it, and he names the process so beautifully of how in Sumer these guys came in and organized the life of the people in a way and created cities and created agriculture. And people became, instead of having a whole rounded life and caring for everybody and the earth, suddenly all I do is produce food, or all I do is produce potteries, or all I do is defend the city, or all I do is whatever. And so people were no longer full human beings living a connected life with each other and the earth. And cities have pulled us further and further away from that. Just yesterday, I was looking at a new documentary called The New Economy. And one of the scenes is a guy has built a bunch of raised beds in a parking lot in Vancouver, BC. And he says in 4 years, they're going to take down the overpasses, the freeway overpasses, and build high rises here, and 20-story high rises, and people are going to live there. And he reaches down and grabs a handful of the earth from his raised beds, and they're going to be as far from this as imaginable.
Yes.
And that's what cities have done since about 3200, 4000 BC. And cities are inextricably intertwined with an empire mindset, with someone in charge acquiring as much as possible, accumulating it, and controlling it, which we talked about when we were looking at the Madonna book, which was originally titled Mary's Power, but that didn't work. So
it works for me. I love that name.
I do too.
Yeah. Yes. And so as you continue, because I mean, you're just continuing. There'll never be a time where you're not doing what you're doing.
I
And to
think
look at your
accurate.
website. I think that's accurate. And I'm just going to bring your website up here for a moment so people that are watching can see the body of work that you bring forwards. these are just some of your books. I would imagine you have more books and more books on the go as well. Unlocking the Power of Your Secret. So it's Metaphysics, Thomas Troward. Unlocking the Power of the Secret, of course, to restore Earth's balance. I just love the way that you bring so many. It's like you're really weaving together so many important topics. Home, choosing humanity's future, apocalypse now. Discovering a
Question
new
mark.
way. Yes. Yes. Discovering a new way. And so the teachings, and then you're really expert. I say this because I believe this on the teachings of Emma Curtis Hopkins. And all of these books that you are writing and bringing forwards for us, for humanity, what would you say is, as an author, I mean, look at this. Dr. Ruth, do you ever have any time to kind of enjoy your life?
Absolutely.
I mean, not that you're still enjoying your life doing the writing, but I mean, just for you, something, or maybe this is it.
That is a big part of it. So in any given week, I'm probably writing or editing 12 to 15 hours. I'm probably teaching 8 to 10 hours. I'm probably making home 8 to 10 hours. I love making home. I've had more addresses than birthdays.
Yes.
And so it's a balanced life. And I rarely do anything with anyone before 11 in the morning, because that's my time to connect with the divine and be centered in what is mine to be and do in the moment. And I have a set of criteria that I talk about in many of these books. In order for it to be mine to do, it must be effortless to bring myself to do it. Ah, yes, I want to do that, right? It must be energizing as I do it. So I come away energized instead of depleted. And it must be enjoyable, or it isn't something that is my gift. If it's in my gift, if it's in my range of things to do, then it's all three of those things. So my formula is effectiveness equals E3: energizing, enjoyable, and effortless.
I will make a banner for this right now so that everybody can see. First of all, here's your website.
Thank you,
So I
dear.
think this is a golden truth here. Effectiveness equals.
Right. And you can do 3 E's. 3 times E.
Which are?
Enjoyable, effortless,
Yes.
and energizing.
Why do you think, or what is your belief around why we, as in general, humanity is quite far removed from this?
There's a bunch of reasons having to do with, thank you, dear, having to do with how people have been used in that structure of the urban environment that got translated into being units in factories, part of the machinery, not people, and replaceable like cogs in a machine. And then in the 1920s, as we were moving away from the industrial way of doing things, a man named Taylor wrote a book called The Science of Management, in which he started out saying employees cannot be trusted. They must be supervised. They're only there for their own interests. And that became the primary textbook for management training. So all of the men who were in management, women were not allowed to be during that period, right, were operating as if nobody was trustworthy and everyone had to be controlled. So you acquire human resources, you accumulate human resources, and you manage or control those human resources. So the workplace was dominating by dominators, if you will, dominated by dominators. So the empire culture was thoroughly embedded in the workplace. And that carried over to the school system because people were training people to work in that environment in the school system. You know, always walk on the right side of the hallway, you know, never, you know, raise your hand except when asked to. Don't speak out in the classroom. You are a cog in this machine and you have to get certain grades to be able to move forward in this machine, et cetera.
And be another cog in another
You got
machine.
it. You got it. Precisely. So that's what the effect of those early, you know, 3,200 to 4,000 years old transitions were. But what's been going on, and I think actually it's interesting because that Science of Management book came out at the same time as Gandhi was waking up in the 20s, and as the man who was the prime minister of South Africa, where Gandhi was waking up, wrote a book called Holism and began a way of thinking about things without intending to, right? And it was the same time that a man in Germany, Ludwig von Bertalanffy, oh, by the way, the guy who wrote Holism was Ian Smuts, S-M-U-T-S, a British prime minister of South Africa in the 20s. And in Germany, a biologist named Ludwig von Bertalanffy was writing a book that he was seeing, oh my goodness, I can use mathematics to describe how living entities, living things work. I'm going to call them living systems. And he wrote a book called General System Theory. So holism and general system theory were evolving at the same time as this book, horrid book on management in Europe, in America. And then as Gandhi is waking up to the potential of people rising to a level of consciousness in which empire cannot happen.
Yes. And so, and the empire, the British Empire,
began to dissolve.
The British Empire that had to break down. Yes.
Right. That was the beginning of the end of empire, which continued through the 1960s. So official empires, as a monarch in charge of an empire, have been dissolving ever since. So, and bless Elizabeth too for transforming the empire into the Commonwealth. Really, that's one of the greatest gifts she gave to humanity. And so then we get the emergence, and this has happened over and over again in every empire. The monarchy becomes dependent on merchants. The empire becomes a conglomerate of merchant princes, the Rothschilds, the JP Morgans, the whoever, and they then take over. And you can see that very clearly in the history of Florence or of Venice, you know, as they were doing their thing. And it is less clear in modern world. But if you look at who's really running the world today, it's the corporations. It's not the governments. So there we go. We have this shift happening out of the official empire into the merchant prince's empire, which always falls apart into three directions. One is fascism, one is socialism, and one is anarchy. And now we're seeing all of those happen as the corporate empire begins to fall apart. And in all of those, something else can emerge. And the difference between this point in history and any of the last 6,000 years is Gandhi woke up. And he invited us as a whole world, as a whole culture, to raise our consciousness to what he called satyagraha or ahimsa, to a state of being in which everyone is sacred. Every aspect of life is sacred. And we just show up and do what is ours to do. And I believe that, you know, I'm not saying he's the only one who did it, but he made it visible and made it possible for many others to do it. When Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to figure out what was his to do, a student of Gandhi's turned him on to Gandhi's work. And if you go to the museum in Atlanta, which I do every time I get to have time in Atlanta, there is an exhibit that is a Gandhi material and a copy of Gandhi's Bhagavad Gita that he shared with Martin Luther King. So, yeah, now we're going into a stage of culture that is based on a higher understanding of who we are and a higher state of consciousness. And that's what I'm calling the new culture, the emerging culture.
So are you transcending new thought with this?
Actually, I am transcending the way most of us have been taught it. This is what Emma offers. This is what Emily Cady offers. And I've just been working with a new book that I'm going to have to adjust the computer here for a second, that I discovered. It was a New Thought practitioner in the 1920s, again, wrote this book. Get it in front of the camera.
Science of Ascension. Lillian DeWaters.
Right. The Science of Ascension is, also in the 1920s is when the Science and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East was published. So she's in that same time frame, and she's talking about how to use New Thought principles to experience what Spalding is describing in Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. So I'm going to, one of my more advanced groups is going to be studying that book this spring. I've got 2 groups doing Emily Cady, 1 group doing Hopkins, and then a group that's going to be doing the Science of Ascension.
I would love to be in that group with you. Tell me if it's open. I don't know. But
thank you. That I appreciate that. That's a closed group at this point. They've been working together.
That's a closed group.
But we'll create, and once I've worked through it with them, then I'll have a sense of how I can do it, and I will open it up.
That will be amazing. And I'm just going to actually show on your website where are we? I just want to get to, where have you gone? You're here. I just want to actually show on your website the page that you have, because you do have classes that are happening for next year.
Yes.
And I have earmarked one of those classes, which is the Emma Curtis Hopkins, which I've seen your videos on YouTube. They are there for anybody. If you're really interested in Dr. Ruth's work and her study and knowledge of Emma Curtis Hopkins, you can find a series of the 12 lessons on YouTube, on her YouTube channel,
and
where she's teaching.
Down on that page, you can see the list.
The list is here, and they are the 12 lessons of Emma Curtis Hopkins. Here we are. Mm-hmm. There we are. And I've listened to all of them, and they're amazing. They're amazing. What insight in there. You can really gain a lot by tuning into those videos and taking them as part of your spiritual practice and self-development. So the classes that you teach, the books that you write, the companies that you go into and talk about systems theory, new thoughts, and all of the work that you're doing, Dr. Ruth, I mean, have you received an honorary award from anybody? If not, I'm giving you one now.
Thank you. I am in Who's Who. They did contact you.
You're in Who's Who.
Yeah, and I'm a member of the ANTN, the affiliated network of the affiliated New Thought Network. I have joined them, and I hopefully will be able to support and help them a bit. But as you know, the work is the work. It calls us, and if someone recognizes it, that's lovely. More that they do it, that's much more important.
Yes, that's the key. Mm-hmm. And the piece here, first of all, I'm going to just read out some comments here because we have people here. Welcome everybody. Sonia, thank you so much for having Dr. Ruth Miller on today. Yes, you're welcome here anytime, Dr. Ruth. She's very informative, absolutely. And Dawn, this conversation is so encouraging. I've recently changed my prayer from anything specific to just asking to be open to divine will. This has been validating. Thank you. And Reverend Sharon, what's Dr. Ruth's website URL? Thank you for asking that. I'm just going to put that up here now, your website, because I had it prepared. There we are.
Thank you
Ruth
so
Miller,
much.
PhD.
Whoops, you missed an L. It's Ruth L. Miller, PhD.
Ruth L. Miller. How could I?
It's okay.
Really?
People do it all the time. For a little while, I went ahead and bought Ruth Miller, but someone else, there are a number of other Ruth Millers in the world.
Oh, now I've put I in there. Okay.
Ruth L.
Ruthie
Miller, PhD.com.
So the thing is, you are living the Science of Mind teachings, the New Thought teachings, and the teachings of Ernest Holmes, because he knew that we are being called to be open at the top.
Yes.
Because it doesn't just stop with his understanding and synthesizing of the work that he was pulling together. There's going to be information that he wasn't aware of at the time, and then new evolving information that wasn't even around when he was here. So here you are bringing that together, and also from a viewpoint where feminism comes into it, and culture and anthropology, and how we actually can live our lives in a way that we can be at one with this planet, with home here, with planet Earth. It's so important, isn't it? Because I think it's easy to get stuck into the effects of life and the politics, religion, race, sex, the monarchy, all sorts of subjects, finances, health, and it can, and our connection to this planet. And what really came to me, our feet are always on the ground. We're magnetized to this planet Earth, aren't we? And yet we don't always have the concern for the planet.
Right. Every physical thing that we see, feel, taste, touch is this planet. It is Earth becoming us, right? One of the books I did is called One Law by Henry Drummond. Now, Henry Drummond was a natural history professor in Glasgow who was also a moody Christian. He was one of the evangelists of that time. So he'd go down to the wharfs on the weekend and teach Bible and born again Christian stuff to the guys on the wharfs. And then he'd go up to the university during the week and teach natural history in the 1850s prior to Darwin. Amazing. So anyway, one of the books is One Law, because he wrote a book called Natural Law in the Spiritual World. And it was the book Ernest Holmes grew up on, that and the Bible. He also wrote a little book that many of us have seen. It's called The Greatest Thing in the World. And it's an analysis of Paul's 1 Corinthians 13, describing the nature of love. So I merged those two together in the One Law book. And what Drummond was saying was that spirit is constantly pulling the life force through to a new level. So the life force comes through the plants so that the minerals, the light and heat become minerals in the stars, right? And then minerals become plants through the root system and the way that plants work. And then plants, which are stable and static, become movable and more aware through animals. So animals take the plants and turn them into motion and a greater awareness, right? And then human beings take all of those things, and we are not only moving and aware, we are aware that we are aware, and we are aware of our connection with spirit. And then spirit, he says, is pulling us with all of that to a new level of being that is primarily spirit, pulling us into who we are really. So we're coming from light and heat in the stars all the way through all these forms of being, so that the fact that we know we are part of spirit allows us then to become one with spirit, and allows us ultimately to be spirit, bringing forth all that is.
This is so powerful. So this is systems theory.
You got it. This is why I say the two just, they just come together completely. There is one system, the all that is. Everything is a subsystem of that. And we can study subsystems, but we can't study them without understanding the whole system. And the whole system governs who and what each subsystem is.
So as we wrap up here, because I'm just really, oh, wow. I thought this concept, Sonia. I thought this concept was Baha'i. It just goes to show that there's only one.
I love it. And that's true. I can find it in Baha'i. I can find it in Buddhism. I can find it in Hinduism. I can find it in the Maori. I can find it everywhere that I look. Hopi, absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Sonia, for understanding that.
And I can see how this system had got erased from the empire culture or the empire way of being, because that really is a system that is so anti this. It's like not everything is the sum is not a part of the whole. It's more of, there are replaceable pieces that replaceable humans that can come in and out. And if that person doesn't show up, then it's okay. We can bring someone else in.
Exactly. So the machine model is what has been driving these cultures for years and is what has been destroying the earth. Whereas the whole system model, the whole spirit becoming more spirit through and as us model, allows for us to feel that connection and be honoring and respecting.
So bringing this down to our daily lives in relationship, for example, with loved ones, and around this time of year when there's a lot going on and we might get fraught, we might not, we might. How do we bring this into our life right now in a practical way, Dr. Ruth? Yes.
Yeah, we bring it into our lives.
Yes.
Absolutely. For me, the winter solstice is that going in to discover the light, to appreciate all the ways the light is showing up around us, to remind us that the light and the joy of the light is inside us, and to wake us up to it. So I have dearly loved the solstice all of my life, whatever it was called, whatever celebration. Okay, so we had Rumi's Urs on the 17th. We had the beginning of Hanukkah on the 18th. My Jewish family and I have celebrated Hanukkah most of the time. My Catholic family is doing Advent. My Wiccan family is doing Wicca, is doing solstice, Yule. I mean, all of my family, is engaged in this season, right? And I get to be part of all of that and enjoy every bit of it. In fact, my menorah is sitting right over there.
Oh, look, mine's here. I just lit mine.
Oh, good for you. Last night was the beginning. Yes, absolutely. And we had one.
We're on the third night. We're on the third night tonight.
That's right. Yeah. And so, the night of the 17th and so on. And it happened that Rumi's Urs and the Hanukkah started the same. So from the 17th through Boxing Day on the 26th, it's almost a holiday every day, right? Yes. A holy day every day. So I look at each day at the wholeness, because holy and whole are the same word. Holism is holy, right? So it's all one. And I just revel in this time of year. I often do an open house during this time to share the light and the love.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Dr. Ruth, we could talk all night, all day. And I thank you so much for being here and for shining your light, for shining the light through you and being here and sharing with me and with the viewers who have been here. Ryan, hello to you, welcome here. And Sharon, and Sonia, welcome, and Dawn, and Wayne. Yes, thank you. Great to be here with you, Wayne. And to learn more from you, Dr. Ruth, and to be more inspired with your evolutionary teachings. Really, I'm excited by what's next. It's like, oh, this is gonna 2023.
Yes.
Watch this space.
Right. And I'm hoping that I get to see you in person when I'm there in May. And this book, it's coming the next level, this next book. So
this is fantastic. And you're coming to the UK. So yes, we will meet in person. That will be amazing.
Love
yes. Thank you, Dr. Ruth Miller, for being here. And of course, everybody, I'm just going to put up here, there it is, Dr. Ruth's website address, ruthlmillerphd.com. Check it out, her classes, her books, her knowledge and wisdom. It's all there, and lots of free content as well that you can tap into and get going on right now. Yes, it's exciting.
Bless you, my dear. Thank you for doing this marvelous work. You're doing a fabulous job.
I love it. And it's so great to be with you again. Thank you, Dr. Ruth Miller. And thank you to everybody that's been listening and watching. We'll see you again with another episode of the Women of Power Hour show in the near future. Bye for now.
Bye. Bless you.